What's up, guys? Welcome back. Ironman 4x4 2.5-inch kit, the foam cell pro kit going on the TRD Pro. I'm going to walk you through step by step on the install, and then of course we'll be testing out the ride quality. We're going to try to keep this video as short as possible, but it will be a little lengthy because I'm going to walk you through exactly how to get this installed if you want to do it on your own. So let's get right into it. This is going to be a fun one. Before we get this party started, safety first. So you can see we have the truck jacked up in the front with our 3-ton Badlands. We have that right in the middle, supporting most of the weight of the truck. But we also have jack stands, one on each side underneath the frame. So what I did was I lowered the jack till it was touching the jack stand, so the weight is kind of being distributed between the two stands and the jack itself. And then we also chalked the rear wheels on both sides, in front of the wheels and behind the wheels. You probably can't see it because of the weeds there, but there are wheel chalks in the front and back of both rear tires. So safety first. We're going to have the wheels off this thing, the front two at the same time. Last thing we want is this truck falling on us. So again, just make sure you're being careful, and you want to do this on as level ground as possible. Unfortunately, I can't get this truck in the garage because of the height and the tent and everything. So we're out here in my driveway, but it's pretty level for the most part. And again, we're taking extra precautions just to make sure we're nice and safe here. So make sure you're on level ground, supported, jack stands, all that good stuff. Let's get the wheels off and get this install started. All right, to get the wheels off, it's a 21 millimeter for those lugs, just in case you don't know. And you can see we took an extra step, and we have our wheels tucked up underneath the side of the truck as well, just in case anything fails. So first step is we want to loosen up our lines. So there's 3 12 millimeter bolts we're going to want to come in here and remove. This one right here, this one right here, and then there's one on the back side right here. Okay, go ahead and take those 12 millimeters out. And what I like to do is as I remove them, I'm going to get the brake lines out of the way, and I'm actually just going to screw the bolt back in there just so I don't lose them. Just an extra, a little tip just to make sure you don't lose any hardware. I've already started loosening these off camera, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove all 3, put them back in their spot, and move on to the next step. Next, we're going to go ahead and loosen our sway bar. So that's going to be this bolt right here. You're going to need to do this on both sides, driver and passenger. It's just a 19 millimeter. And if you have an impact wrench, it is going to come in super handy for this job. Just so you know, should make easy work of this. Again, 19, remove it on this side and the passenger side. Now we want to take a 17 millimeter and loosen up there's a bolt. This is the front of the sway bar. There's a bolt here, and you may not be able to see it, but you can't miss it. It's right up here. Again, driver and passenger side. Don't want to remove these all the way. Just loosen them up so the sway bar kind of hangs a little bit free. So here you can see what I mean. We didn't take it down all the way, but we can kind of maneuver the sway bar as needed. Next, we want to go ahead and remove the castle nut. We're going to free up the tie rod. There's a cotter pin right here. Just carefully bend it straight so you can then go ahead and pull it out of the castle nut. And just be careful you don't break it, because if you do, you're going to need a new one, which I don't have readily accessible. So we're just going to go ahead and straighten it. Okay, so that cotter pin is out. What I found with mine anyway is I hit it with a little PB blaster because it was covered in rust. I was able to get it out without breaking it, thankfully, so I don't have to worry about going to get a new one. But if you have, WD-40, PB blaster, whatever, hit it with a little bit of that, and it did come out a lot easier once I loosened it up. So this is a 24 castle nut. We're going to go ahead and loosen this up. Do not take it out all the way yet. Okay, so the reason we're not taking it out all the way, we want to kind of use that to be able to free up the tie rod. So I'm going to grab, I'm going to start with my soft rubber mallet and just kind of hit it from the side. See if you can maybe loosen the tie rod up. If you have to hit it from the top, just, be a little careful hitting it from the top. But we need to free up the tie rod from this spot. So I'm actually gonna, okay, that's still attached. So I might have to grab my my actual hammer. I was hoping this would work, but just be careful, tap it on the side, try to loosen it up. If that doesn't work, just give it a couple gentle taps from the top. Next, we're going to come underneath the lower ball joint, and we have 2 saddle bolts, one right here and then one here on the other side. You can't miss it. There's a castle nut in the middle. We're not touching that one. So it's the 2 saddle bolts on the outside. They're 22s. Now you want to undo these kind of evenly. So I'm just going to go ahead and start this one and then just kind of go back and forth until they're both totally out. Next, we're going to come in and take the 22 millimeter and remove our lower shock bolt. We'll start here on the nut. Don't lose your washer right there. So now I have the 22 on the bolt side, and we're just going to slowly remove the bolt. All right, so we came across our first issue. Once we removed our lower strut bolt, I couldn't get my lower control arm to flex down enough. Well, the next step before you do anything else is you want to remove the 4. There's 4 bolts up here. They're 14 millimeter, and that's what's going to free the top end of the strut assembly. But the issue was my lower control arm. Get the tie rod out of the way here. My lower control arm would not flex down. It was springing back up. So what I had to do was I had to loosen up my cam bolts on the lower control arm. That right there. And the other one right there. Okay, before you do that, you want to take a paint pen or a Sharpie or something and mark them. I've already loosened it, but you can see the black line right there that I made on this piece here. On the nut part, I have another black line. Again, you can't see it because I've already spun it and loosened it. But you want to do that because then once we're done and we tighten our cam bolts back up, you want to make sure those black lines realign. That's going to make it way easier for alignment when you take it after the kit's installed, because obviously I'm sure you guys know once you install a lift kit, you got to get the truck realigned. So if you need to loosen your cam bolts, you may or may not have to, but if you have to, just make sure you mark. Like this side, you could actually kind of see there's the black line right there and then the black line right there. They should line up when we're done. Again, I've already loosened them. That's why they don't right now. Okay, just wanted to point that out. In their video, they don't have to do that. Mine, I absolutely did. There was no way that lower control arm was going down low enough. Mine was actually springing back up. I could not get this strut assembly out without doing that. So just wanted to mention it. Now that we have the 4 14 millimeter nuts removed up top, we can go ahead and lower the lower control arm down and we can remove the strut assembly. Okay, since we have those 4 removed up top, I'm just going to kind of hold the strut assembly in place, push the lower control arm down, and remove the strut assembly like so. So when it comes to putting the new assembly back in, you want to pay attention because it does matter driver to passenger side. They send them with the sticker. The blue sticker is the driver side. The other one has a green sticker on it. But the other way you can tell is there's a little notch right here. You're going to want that facing the outside of the vehicle. And then these 2 holes that you can see, hopefully right there and there, they're going to be here and here. They're going to be towards the rear of the vehicle. So it's going to go in the truck just like this, okay? So now it's just a matter of getting these 4 pegs lined up with the holes up here and then seated in the lower control arm. So what I think I'm going to do is, and let's see how this works, I think I'm going to try to slide the top up in there. I do have the nuts right here. Ironman does send new nuts, but you can reuse the factory, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to try to get the 4 pegs through up here, just get a nut on it to get it started, and then we'll worry about getting the rear down into the lower assembly there. So let's see how it goes. All right, that actually wasn't all that bad. So I got 2 started, and now we'll worry about getting the lower position properly, get the other 2 on there, and tighten them down. So once you have the four, I started the four nuts up there. None of them are tightened down just yet. You want the shock, the assembly to have a little bit of wiggle room. So you can see we have the bottom into the lower control arm. Now we're just going to take our strut bolt, lower strut bolt, and just kind of get everything lined up and push it back through the assembly. Once you have that through, take your washer and your nut, and we are not going to tighten this down. This is the one bolt that you're going to want to wait until the truck is back on the ground before you really tighten it down. So we're just going to kind of hand tighten it for right now. It's a load bearing bolt, so again, do not tighten that. I'm just going to kind of touch it so it's there. I'm going to snug up the top four now, and we'll start reassembling the driver's side, and yeah, we'll be done with the front. Next up is the two saddle bolts from the lower ball joint down here. Now this can be a little bit tricky when you have the new strut assembly in. You want to make sure you have it lined up properly, and when you're threading these two in down here, just make sure you start by hand and just be careful not to cross thread them. It's very easy to do, cross threading them, so just make sure you're lined up. You may even need help, somebody to maybe, you know, pull down on your spindle assembly to get them lined up with the lower ball joint. But just whatever you do, and then as we're tightening them, again, just like when we removed them, we did, you know, a little bit at a time, swapping back and forth side to side. We're going to do the same exact thing going back in. We're going to tighten a little, switch sides back and forth until they're nice and secure. Next up is our tie rod. So just kind of line everything up. You can kind of move your spindle assembly around until it gets lined up and pops up. Pops up through. We'll take our castle nut, tighten this back down, and you want to line up, let me get it tight and then I'll show you what I mean. You want to line up the hole so you can get your cotter pin back through there. If I remember correctly, this was 22 or 24? 24. So let me get that tightened real quick. All right, so I'll have my wife bring the camera in close, because your cotter pin, the bolt, hopefully it shows up. There's a hole in the bolt. So now we want to take the cotter pin that we took out, push it back through like so. So you want to make sure the hole in the bolt lines up with one of these slots on the castle nut. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So we're just going to kind of very lightly tap the cotter pin back into place, and then we'll take the tail end and bend it back up like it was when we started. All right, so here's where we're at. We went ahead and retightened the 3 locations of those 12mm bolts, retighten those, so everything, all the lines, brake lines and all that good stuff is re-secured. The only thing we did not reattach on this side yet is the sway bar. We can't do that. I'm going to go over and do the passenger side. I'm not going to waste time showing that on camera. It's literally the exact same process, but we can't do the sway bar. We can't tighten it back up until we get the passenger side done. Okay, and then the only other thing I got to do is realign my cam bolts to get those, the paint marker matching up. But other than that, the driver's side is done. So heading over to the passenger side, and I'll pick back up with you as soon as I'm done over there. We'll get the sway bar linked back in place. All right guys, passenger side is done, so all we have left to do is hook up the sway bar. You can see I already have it set in place. So now what we're going to do is the 19 that we removed at the bottom of the sway bar link, and then the 2 17s on each side that I showed you in the beginning of the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here and just tighten a little bit, then tighten these two a little bit, then go to the passenger side and just kind of rotate around just so the sway bar is tightened nice and evenly. Okay, that's kind of important. You don't want to just hammer one spot down and then move on. So again, going to start here with the 19, 2 17s, passenger side 2 17s, passenger side 19, and then just keep going around until everything is snugged back. We'll get the wheels back on and the front is done. All right guys, front tires are back on, torqued to spec, but look at how bad we need an alignment. Look at those front tires, the way they're leaning. It's like that on both sides. And real quick too, once you have it on the ground like this, don't forget, I've already gone back up underneath and tightened our lower shock bolts. I actually went back around and rechecked all of my sway bar bolts as well. Once it's on the ground, you definitely want to do that. Again, those two lower shock bolts, they should have been hand tightened until it was on the ground. Okay, once it hit the ground, I went back, tightened them down. And again, just recheck the sway bar, but I actually can't get over how bad those wheels are leaning. We need an alignment ASAP. Let's get the back done. All right, guys, we got the truck flipped around. Tires are already off. All of the safety measures are in play. Just make sure you're doing that. Before we do anything further with the struts or anything with the suspension, we need to free up our brake lines. Okay, so there's 3 different locations you're gonna wanna loosen up. It's a 12mm bolt. It's right here. Now, we obviously have the airlift bags, so you're gonna see it right here. You won't see bags unless you have them, obviously. There's one on the driver side as well. We're on the passenger side right now. There's one on the driver side in the exact same location, and then I'll put a picture on your screen where the third one is. It's up in the middle of the truck right by the pumpkin. So I'll put a picture there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and remove those bolts to free up the brake lines. So instead of a picture, I figured I'd bring you up under here because there's actually 2 locations you want to undo. I also removed the spare tire just to get it out of our way. Don't really need to do that, just gives me more room. So the 2 other locations are this bolt right here. You can see I already loosened that bracket, and then right up above that bolt right there. Also both 12mm. Take those out, loosen up that wire. All right, so once we got all the brake lines loosened up, we're gonna start by removing the sway bar end links. This bolt right here, we're gonna do it on both sides. Go ahead and take those right out. It's a 17mm. All right, now that we got the lines all loosened up, you're gonna need a ratcheting 19 and an 8mm. And what you need to do is you need to take the 8mm and place it on top of the shock bolt right here. Well, first, actually, you're going to want the 19 down over the big part of the bolt like that. Now you take the 8mm, put it on the top there, and you have to be careful because the way it's shaped, it'll only go on one way. So at first, if you think it doesn't fit, which I did, I realized it's the way the bolt is shaped. It's kind of like a rectangle instead of a normal bolt. So put the 8mm on the top there, and then that's going to hold, the 8mm is going to hold the bolt in place while we loosen the nut. And I had to hit mine with PB Blaster. If you're doing this on a newer vehicle, it's probably going to be a heck of a lot easier for you. Just unfortunately, my truck is 2 years old and everything is kind of rusted out. So I'm having a little bit harder of a time. If you're going to do this on a newer vehicle, it will be much easier, but just go ahead and do this for the top, for the driver and passenger side. Well, guys, here we are the next day. So that did not go as planned. I ran out of time. Let me show you what I had to do to get my rear shocks out. I literally had to cut the stem. I had to cut the sleeve off and then cut the stem. And let me show you why. The good thing is I'll be able to give you a good look at what you should have to do. So this is the top bushing that I was showing you last night, where that top piece right there, that's where you're going to put the 8mm on that top little piece that's sticking up, and then the 19 would be loosening the nut. My truck is 2 years old, 40,000 miles on it, and literally everything underneath is just so rusted. This 19, I was able to start it, but then it literally just got to a point where, number one, I ran out of room to hold that 8mm top piece, but it was just so seized on there. I doused it in PB Blaster. It just was not coming off. I did everything in my power. I really did not want to do this. I actually intended on keeping my my TRD Pro stock suspension. I was going to tuck it away in the garage just in case, whatever. But the rear shocks are now trash because I literally had to take my angle grinder and cut the stem and able to get the bushing out of the top, and then, you know, the lower portion, the shock body, removed. Now, the only thing I didn't show on camera, once you hopefully get that top piece loosened, all you have to do is down at the bottom of the shock, I'll put a picture on the truck. You can't miss it though, it's right at the bottom of the shock. it's a 17 millimeter, just take that bolt out and then your shock will be free. But again, if you're doing this on an older vehicle, just beware. I would actually recommend maybe hitting it with PB Blaster the day before you're gonna do this install. Hopefully it'll work for you. But as I mentioned, I mean, you guys know I'm no stranger with a wrench in my hand. This just wasn't happening. It wasn't coming off. It was completely seized. I could have tried taking heat to it or something like that. But honestly, I was so frustrated, I just said the hell with it. I took the angle grinder to it, cut the stem, and now my rear shocks are trash. With the shocks out, now we can get to the springs. So the rear end is going to droop, the rear axle, but if you don't have enough room to get your spring out, you want to do the passenger side first because that's the quote-unquote harder side. What I've done is I jacked up the driver's side because what that's going to do is lower the passenger side even more. So with it jacked up like that, we should be able to grab this spring and relatively easily slide it out of there. And just make sure you're watching your brake lines while you're doing this. All right, so there we go. And it's going to be even easier. Oops, sorry, I'm hitting the camera. Hopefully I didn't do that while I was trying to show you guys that. It's going to be even easier for you if you don't have airbags. The only thing I did off camera was I took my lower brackets off my airbags because they are obviously attached to the axle. If you have airbags, you'll have to do that. And we are going to be getting that 2-inch spacer that'll make up for the lift so we can still keep our airbags installed. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process for the driver's side. That'll be even easier because of the way the axle flexes. So same process, just going to get the driver's side out and we'll take a closer look here at what we need to do. All right guys, so here is the comparison. The rear springs from Ironman, according to them, there is no difference as far as driver or passenger. Sometimes that does matter, but according to Ironman, they are the same. So just grab one of the springs. This secondary bump stop, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm actually not 100% sure what that is. That's what it looks like. We're just gonna go ahead and remove that. Now, Toyota, let me just put this down. I don't want to scratch the finish on it too much before we get it in the truck. Toyota, on their springs, they have this little covering. It is held on with adhesive, but as you can see, you can easily peel it off. We're going to peel that off and put it on the Ironman spring. Okay, so just go ahead and take this off the stock spring, and then we're going to take the Ironman spring. I'm going to start on the pigtail end, and we're going to be putting this on the end. If you look, one end has, it's kind of a rounder end. This side down here, hopefully you can see it has like a flatter end. So we're going to be putting the isolator strip, or no, I'm sorry, not the isolator strip, this little strip of material on the rounded end. So we're just going to start at the pigtail side and push it in place all the way down to the end of the strip. So it should look something like that for you. And this is actually going to be the bottom of the spring. Okay, so now we'll flip it back upside down, or right side up actually. You are going to reuse the bump stop. So we're going to tuck that in there just like that. And now we're ready to put in the passenger side. Again, you want to do the passenger side first. So we're going to get it up in there and I'll show you how it's positioned once I have it on the truck. All right, passenger side is in. You definitely want to have the driver's side jacked up. Obviously, I already lowered it back down, but because the Ironman springs are taller, it's a little snug getting up in there. And actually, let me show you the other side because I went from the other side and it definitely made it easier. Okay, so here we're looking from the rear passenger wheel well, and what I did was I kind of fed it down through this area in between my bag and the brake line. Now again, if you don't have these bags in the way, it is going to be much easier for you. If you do have bags, this is the easiest way I found to do it. And actually what I did to even give myself even more slack with the brake line, I undid that 12 millimeter right there. You still have plenty of play. I wasn't stressing any lines at any point. I made sure of it, but that's how I did it. I went through there. And then the last thing I want to point out is if you can see how the perch right here comes up. What you want to do is the end of the pigtail, you want to have that roughly, I don't know, maybe a ½ inch or so away from the bottom of that incline. Okay, you can kind of see how mine's sitting right there. Just pay attention to that. You want your pigtail to end right in that area, so spin it if you need to. And the last thing you want to pay attention to is when you're lowering the driver's side with the jack, make sure that the top of the spring is sitting up in the upper perch. Okay, you can't see it now because the bump stop is there. It's positioned where it should be, but there's an indentation up there where that bump stop and spring should sit up into. Okay, so just pay attention to that. As you're lowering the driver's side with the jack, I actually kind of had to reach over with one arm, lower the jack very slowly as I held the spring in the proper position with my other arm. A little tricky if you have a second person, even easier, but just make sure it's, you know, sitting correctly on the perch. I'm just gonna go ahead and repeat the driver's side, not gonna show it on camera, and then we'll get the rear shocks in. Before we get the shocks in the truck, I just want to point out a couple things. So if you pull your sleeve off, you can see they have this bump stop here. Go ahead and make sure this is pushed down at least some. That way it'll give you enough stem to get up through the perch that we need to. And the other good thing about these shocks are, you can see you can manually extend or contract them, which is gonna make it easy for install. So basically, all we need to do, get the sleeve back on, and then a couple things that you need to pay attention to when you're installing. When you get your hardware, you're gonna get 2 packs of stuff that looks like this. Now, if you watch Ironman's video, he almost kind of contradicts himself, because at one point he shows you step by step, piece by piece, the order that they go in. But if you pay attention, when he puts the rear shock in, it's actually not in the same order. And the reason I can say that is if you look, when he goes to put the rear shock in, you can see this piece that has the flange sticking up is on top of the shock. But yet when he shows you piece by piece, he has this piece up on top of the perch. If you watch their video, you'll know what I'm talking about. The other thing is he also says to match the factory setup with the bushings. In order to do that, the factory setup, if you look, again, this is the piece that I cut off, so this is the piece that was on top of the perch. You can see that the piece with that flange that I just showed you is indeed on top of the perch. So what that means is, in order to line these up properly, you're gonna get 2 of them that look like this. They're identical, okay? Notice the smaller hole. You get one that looks similar, but it has a bigger hole. And then again, you get the one with the flange sticking up, okay? So below the perch, so on top of the strut, you're gonna take one of the 2 that look identical with the smaller hole. That's gonna go down first. Then you're gonna take the grommet or bushing that has the like hole cut out in the middle. That's gonna go down next. And again, I'm just matching the factory setup. And again, he does say that in their video to match the factory setup. On top of that, we're gonna put the one with the bigger hole. It's gonna go on like this. So you can see it's somewhat sticking up. It goes on there like so. So now we're gonna stick this up through the perch, and I'll show this on video, and I will show you how the other 3 go in what orientation, and make sure you have your nut handy to get this, because we're gonna do the top first, which you're gonna see here in a second. All right, so here we go. We got you up close and personal. I wanna make sure this makes sense. So again, nothing on there. We're gonna take one of the 2 that look identical. It's gonna go in this orientation with the cupped portion kind of facing down, like so. Bushing that has the hole cut out in the middle. Then the piece that looks like this with the bigger hole, and you can kind of see how the indentation, that's gonna go down. Now we're gonna feed it up through there. Next is gonna be the one with the flange, and that's gonna go on top, and you're gonna want that flange to make sure it's sitting down in the hole on the perch, which it is. I just felt it go in. Then the grommet like this with the flange that's sticking up is gonna go next. And then the second of the two that look identical is gonna go on top of there, okay? So just like that. Once we have the top in positioned and that top nut started, we can come down here, and again, as you can see, makes it super easy to line up, okay? So we're just gonna line up the hole. Now you do have to pay attention to, hopefully you can see this, the lower portion here is not centered, okay? You want these stickers, you want to face the front of the truck. And you'll see why, because if you try to do it backwards like this, the body of the shock is gonna hit right here, okay? So you want the side that's closer to the edge to go in like that. And these stickers, it's the easiest way to tell. Those stickers are gonna face the front of the truck. All right, so we'll just go ahead and get these started on the lower mount, and we'll go ahead and grab a dead blow or my soft mallet and kind of hammer that on there. All right, perfect. Top is sitting how it should. That flange is down in the perch. That's on there. We can take our 17 and tighten this back down. Now you can go ahead and fully tighten these. It's not like the front where you have to wait until it's on the ground. So I'm gonna grab my 17 and go ahead and hammer that down. And then we'll tighten the top. The top is gonna tighten the same way as you remove the stock. We're not gonna have the same issues because this is brand new and it's not gonna be rusted out. But you're gonna use that 8mm, you know, on the top like I showed you with the 19, or actually I think this is a 21 from Ironman. But yeah, you're gonna tighten this the same way as you removed the factory one. So the Ironman is actually a 19. I misspoke, I thought it might have been a 21. And as you can see, I'm not holding the top just yet. You can see that little spot where we put the 8mm starting to peek through. So once we get it to right about there, now we'll grab our 8, hold that top piece in place as we tighten down the 19 fully. All right, passenger side shock is done. I'm gonna repeat the process on the driver's side. All right, guys, driver's side strut is on. So we are just about done, other than going back and buttoning up all of those 12mm that we removed for the brake lines and the electrical and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead, recheck all of that, make sure I get every bolt that I took out and get all that stuff secured. Also, don't forget to reattach your rear sway bar where we disconnected the end links. So yeah, I'm gonna get the tires thrown on, make sure all that stuff is buttoned up, and I'll pick back up with you. We'll wrap the video up. So there she is. All 4 wheels are on. She's back on the ground. We'll give you an up close look here. Take a look at the front first, just in case you're wondering what it looks like up underneath there. Can't really show you much else with the wheels in the way, but that's how she's sitting right now. Sorry about the noise. There's a bike going by. So here in the rear is the biggest thing that I'm noticing. So if you see the gap in the wheel well, my airbags, I was able to reattach them, and they're within the limits of what airlift calls for as far as like compression ratio, you know, when they're at 5 psi. I did not have to add those blocks, which I'm actually going to return them. I ordered them, but I didn't have to add them. I was able to secure my airbags as is, and everything is working fine. Now, the biggest thing I'm noticing is I only have my bags right now at 5 psi. Typically, I would run them between 12 to 15, just because of all the weight we have with the tent and the rack and all that good stuff. On a daily basis, I would run my bags between like 12 and 15 in that general area. Now I'm able to keep them down at 5, not rely on them at all, and you can see how well the new springs are handling all that weight. So again, bags are only at 5 psi, and there is no sag whatsoever. So I'm gonna hook the boat up and test that out. You know, maybe I'll do a follow-up with that. But yeah, that's awesome that now I can just keep the bags at 5, not rely on them because of all the extra weight. And you know, that may be even helping with ride quality a little bit. I didn't notice too much of a difference with them bags. Honestly, even at 12 or 15, the ride quality was still really good. So I don't think that's playing much into it. I just like the fact that I don't have to rely on them. And you know, those springs are now making up for all that weight. So I'll give you a look in here. You're only going to really be able to see the top of the strut. You can see how it's nice and leveled out. Can't really show you much else, but you pretty much saw everything during the install. So yeah, huge plus. And just so you guys know, the rear springs that I went with, they were the 2.5-inch lift. I'll put it on the screen. I want to say it was like for an extra up to 440 pounds. I'll put the specs on the screen of the springs that I went with, because you do have different options there. But I mean, honestly, it's perfect. I mean, the truck is sitting pretty right now without them bags really playing much of a role at all, because they're only at 5. So there you have it, guys. We just got back from getting our alignment done. Everything went smooth as butter. Only cost me $116 at my local Coast to get the alignment done. The specs look good, and the ride quality is phenomenal. That was my biggest worry. If you guys have been following my channel, you know, I've been asked so many times, when am I going to lift it? When am I going to lift it? The truck is 2 years old with 40,000 miles on it, and I was so hesitant to lift it because I loved the stock TRD Pro Fox suspension. The ride quality was phenomenal. That was the biggest reason I haven't lifted this truck up to this point. But with the off-roading and stuff that we're doing, I really did want to get it at least a little bit higher. And honestly, from the 25-minute ride home, the ride quality is phenomenal. I literally couldn't tell a difference whatsoever. It's not any better, but it sure as heck ain't any worse. I literally hit some potholes and bumps on purpose just to see how it would feel, just to kind of test it out initially. Obviously, you know, on a 25-minute ride, you're not going to do too much testing, but I purposely hit some bumps and speed bumps, or I'm sorry, potholes, not speed bumps, on purpose just to see how it would feel. I cannot tell a difference between this suspension and the Fox suspension that was stock on the TRD Pro, which makes me extremely happy because again, that's the reason I didn't lift this truck. I did not want to mess with the ride quality. So it is smooth as butter. The alignment went perfectly, no issues there whatsoever. So yeah, I could not be happier. Obviously, we'll be doing some updates in the future. We'll get this thing off-road now with the new suspension. But you know, you saw the install. If you want to do it yourself, for the average DIYer, it's doable, obviously. I mean, it's not that bad at all. It is a decent amount of work, which is kind of why I'm sitting down right now. I am a little sore, but it's not that bad at all. Just follow the steps that I laid out in the video. I showed you guys every step of what I did. So if you follow it, you know, step by step, with just your, you know, your average everyday tools, you saw an impact wrench is definitely one thing I would recommend having if you're going to do this, for obvious reasons. That definitely played a role, you know, for getting the bigger bolts especially removed from the truck. So an impact wrench and proper safety stuff. You know, you saw what I did with the jack stands, the wheel chocks, all that stuff. Just make sure you're safe if you're going to do this by yourself. But it really is not that bad of an install. It's just a decent amount of work. Takes a little bit of time, especially if you hit a couple hiccups like we did with with those rear shocks, especially having to cut them out of there like that. But other than that, not that bad of an install. And the finished product, I love. I'm absolutely loving. So we'll keep you updated if I do have any hiccups or you know, issues with it. But so far, love the look of it. The ride quality is phenomenal. There's no difference whatsoever, so I couldn't be happier. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns on anything I showed you, as always, put it down below. I do try to get back to just about every comment that I can. With the channel growing the way it is, it does get a little bit harder to keep track and keep up with the comments, but I'll help you out however I can. And comment down below. Let me know what you think about the install, about the look, and, you know, whatever you want to talk about. So, as always, guys, appreciate you guys watching if you're still hanging around, and stay tuned for some updates in the future. Questions, comments, concerns, put them down below. We'll see you on the next video. Take care.